your mic on?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, you're live.
All righty then. This week we begin with Vayikra, chapter 4, verse 21, which is also known as Leviticus. Before I start that, let's recall where we left off. A bit dramatic last week, if you recall. What we learned from verse 20, and I'll read my translation once again. And do to the young bull as was done to the young bull of the sin. In other words, this is the second bull. So you had the bull for the sin offering, and this is the second bull. And it says, and the Cohen, of course, I've added the word Mashiach because all throughout this chapter, we've learned that the Cohen is the Mashiach. And for those of you who are jumping up and down, the anointed one, the Mashiach is the anointed one. So the anointed Cohen, the Mashiach Cohen, will be a covering over them and they will be forgiven. And so what we learned from this was that the sacrifice was not the covering. There was a very famous rabbi in the first century who said, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness for sin. And he's right. That's not wrong in any way. But that pulled the focus for way too many people, Jews, Gentiles, you name it. A lot of people went down the wrong road because of they thought that the blood was the covering for sin, and it's not. There is a sacrifice made by the Mashiach Cohen, and that Mashiach Cohen is the covering for the sin. Do we remember? It says, and the Mashiach Cohen will be a covering over them, and they will be forgiven. Just a reminder of how dramatic last week was. So we're going to begin this week. In English, the Hebrew would translate strangely, but it's, and make come, which of course we would say, and bring, the young bull to from outside to camp and burn with he as that burned the young bull, the first sin, the assembly he. So this is a second assembly, right? So it's the first time this happened, this is the second time, second bull, that kind of thing. It begins with Vehotzi, which maybe that's what he was saying. Years ago, this man asked me if I spoke Hebrew, and I said hello to him in Hebrew. And I think he said Hotzi to me. I remember thinking, bring what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I think he was telling me to bring it. I didn't even talk to him. I thought, this guy don't speak Hebrew at all. I don't do the modern very well, I'll admit. Although I've been working on it some lately, trying to, get all up to date and cool. I think that may be what he said to me was bring it, and I didn't get it. All right. Anyway, so it's to make someone come or something like, so if you put a halter on a horse and you got that lead rope and you get it to follow you, you're bringing it, right? So that's the idea there. Then it says et, which is a Hebrew word that has no actual meaning. It's just as if you just put an arrow. In fact, when I translate, I literally put an arrow in place of the word et, because that's really all it is. It points to something. And in this case, hapar. Remember that the pardon me, Roy? Is that the cat that you, no, your new shoes? No, the par is the young bull. Boy, I'm getting crickets here. Then the next word is el, which is two, and that's that one that I love. The what it says, it's a noun indicative of motion. I can't wrap my head around that, but anyway, it's to turn from here to here. That's the image behind it anyway. So this is mechutz, from outside. So remember, this was taken outside to the unclean place and all that stuff, and now it's being, after all this stuff that we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks was done, now it's being brought back, right? That's what they're saying. La Mahane, or Hane, I would imagine some would pronounce it. So it's from outside the camp. And then it says Vesareth. I have like the world's worst case of dry mouth today. I'm having a hard time talking, so please forgive me. Not that it's any different than normal, I suppose. Saref, and burn. This is a strange word. It's from the idea to suck in, to absorb, to drink in, to swallow down. But if you think about it, that's what flames do. They're consuming it, and that's where they get this idea. But it is used of the idea to drink and consume something, even of eating it. Don't know if they use it that way in the biblical source material, but I have read it that way before. So this is Oto. We would say with it. But again, it's an arrow pointing to, and then it's using just the Hebrew letter that means, we would say it. We could say he. It just depends. And so you could call the bull a he, or you can call him an it. It makes no difference. And this is ka'asher, as that saraf. So you're going to consume it in the same way it was consumed before, or in this case, you're going to burn it in the same way that it was burned before. Maybe I should say cook it, right? Because this is a barbecue. And this is et, which is pointing at something. And what is it pointing at? The par, can't roll my tongue is stuck in my mouth. I can't even roll my R's. Hapar, which is the young bull. So that's what it's pointing at. Then this is Harishon. Ooh, that one rolled. The Rosh, right? So it's the head. No, it's the first. When you put the E sound in there, it's always first. The first. Why would that have any connection with head? Well, everything comes from the head. I had a doctor trying to convince me that all pain is a mental disorder. If you have chronic pain, you have a mental disorder, right? And early on in the conversation, this conversation lasted for a year, on and off, on and off. But one of the earlier times that she was talking to me, she was trying to convince me of this because it all starts here. And I remember thinking, well, in order for your body to release flaccillation, can I say it that way? It all starts here. So I'm just saying, passing gas is a mental disorder, according to her logic. Anywho, I just thought I'd say that. But that's the whole idea, though. Everything starts from here. If you're going to move your hand, if you're going to do anything, it's controlled from here. It all begins here, in the beginning. Rishon. Then it says hatat. So we've said the first. Remember the first sin. And just for kicks, since this is a new video, let's talk about what sin is and what sin isn't. I'll go as quickly as I can. I know some of you are saying, "Oh, again," but it's very important because we don't know if someone's going to see this video way before they see any of the other 10,000 videos I said this in. So it's important to know what I'm talking about. A really wise man in the first century, he was a Jewish rabbi. He said that everyone who commits sin is also, comma, wasn't the end of it. Well, at least this is how we do it in English. Because sin is Torah, rebellion. So I say that every Christian and every Jew needs to learn this, because he's right. I don't care if you hate all Christians and you don't want anything to do with Christianity and blah, blah, blah. I'm okay what you want, but you should really learn this. It's very important. I can't even begin to tell you how important this is. Because when the Christians start telling you that they live by grace and not by the law, this to them. Hey, this is in your New Testament, 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. Is that right? It says that everyone who commits sin is also in violation. Thereby will probably say law, but what's the law? It's the Torah. Because sin is Torah, rebellion. So the thing you say to them is, look here, listen up. If the Torah says to do it and you don't, then that's sin. If the Torah says not to do it and you do, that's sin. All right. So now that we know what sin is, and by the way, what sin is not, we can move on. Then it says ha-kahal. The kahal is the assembly. It's I'm not going to say it's like the word church, where like if your building burns down, you say, well, that's not really the church. The church is the people and we'll rebuild. I've heard that 500 times if I've heard it once. Now, I'm not going to make that connection here because I don't believe it's quite right. This actually is the building. But in this case, we're really talking more about the tent in the wilderness, very specifically. All right. Although they do from time to time use it of the building itself, and probably they do use it of the people. I can't think of any place where they do, but they probably do. You never know. Why would they do that? Why would they have three different words for it? Well, because of monotony. The Jews are the ones that started this. Let's blame them. You know how when you were taking English lit and they told you don't use the same word in the same sentence and try not to use the same word more than once in the paragraph and blah, blah, blah. That comes from Judaism. That's what they did. Instead, they were not giving you bullet points by calling the temple by three different names. You know, you got the temple that's the stone building, you got the tabernacle to point out that it's the one in the wilderness, and then you got the Mishkan. Maybe we'll use that word to say, well, that's the people. Well, they're all interchangeable. And they don't interchange them because they're all something different. They interchange them to break up the monotony. You got to keep that in mind. They also will use it to make something more important. That's another reason. So you got to be able to tell the difference. How do you tell the difference? Well, you read Hebrew long enough, you'll know the difference. And that's really the way you learn it. You either speaking it to somebody or you're reading it enough that you eventually get to where you know the difference. There's a lot of stuff like that in every language, or you just have to know the language to really get that. All right, so the translation is real simple. And bring the young bull outside the camp and burn it in the same way that the first young bull for the sin of the assembly. Okay, I got ahead of myself. I thought we were bringing the thing back in. We're taking it out. Sorry about that. But that's all we get from that. Oh man, my tongue is so stuck to the roof of my mouth. I can barely concentrate. All right, so verse 22 would read basically that leader he sinned and made one from all commandments, and it uses God's proper name Yahweh. This is God his, that not shall do an error and guilt. Well, or guilty. It starts off with Asher, which just means that, T-H-A-T, or maybe we write the word W-H-I-C-H. Those are your two choices here. And either one can be used at any time. It doesn't really make any difference. Then we say Nasi. Nasi, that's the leader, the lifted up one, the prince. A lot of time, most of the time probably, when you see the word Nasi, you're going to see prince in your Bible. And they do, the person who oversees how things go in the synagogue is not necessarily the rabbi, right? It's usually the Nasi, and the Nasi can be the rabbi, we'd have to be really well educated to be able to do both, because they're really two very different jobs and generally not held by the same person. But if you're out in the middle of $10 3 3/4 like we are, that may be necessary. Anyway, so he's the leader. He's the guy that sets up, okay, it starts at this time, and first we do this, and next we do that, and blah, blah, blah. It seems odd that somebody would do that, since that we basically all do exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. It almost doesn't matter which group you're with. That's true. Judaism is pretty consistent in that, but there's a lot of things that we do different. Ours, we do it in the same order as your normal conservative, or maybe more hardcore than conservative Hasidic group does it, but we don't use the same liturgy. I mean, we do the liturgy the same way and all that, but our liturgy comes directly out of the Bible, where most people's liturgy comes out of something somebody made up to sound like it came out of the Bible. I don't understand that. If you're just going to try to make people think that this is a Bible verse, why not use a Bible verse? So we use Bible verses. It's not terribly different. And we're using the Bible verse that they were basically trying to mimic. I just don't understand that kind of thinking. So ours is a little bit different, but not dramatically. I mean, I'm not sure that very many Jews would even notice it. So anyway, this is the guy who does that, the Nasi. He's the leader. He's the person who's in charge. Then it says Yechetah. Well, that's your word for sin. That's that we're talking about Torah rebellion, because sin is Torah rebellion. You always have to remember that. If you don't remember the first part, at least remember the last part. Sin is Torah rebellion. All right. Then it says ve'asa. Wait, you all know that word. You heard it a trebazillion times. Trebazillion. I like that. So it's properly to labor, to work about anything, to make, to produce by labor, to manufacture, to fabricate. And in English, we say do, did, done, made. All of those words are acceptable. So then it says achat. That's the word for one. Achat. It can be the ordinal number one. Those are pretty much your only choices there that I can think of off the top of my head. Then it says mikol. That's from all. So this is going to be all, totality, that sort of thing. From all mitzvot. Mitzvot. I hope we all know what that word means. That's the commandments. It's command written in plural, because ot here, ot. Ot doesn't always mean that a word is plural, because some words in Hebrew actually end in the ot sound, and they're not plural, because just the way the word is spelled, it sounds that way. There's not a lot of them, though. Usually if the end of a word sounds like ot, that's almost always a feminine plural ending, just if you're taking notes. But it's a command, it's a precept, especially used of the precepts of God. Of a human teacher can be your rabbi's precepts. The idea of prohibition is found, as in thou shalt not. But thou shalt is also part of it, don't you think? And then it says Yahweh. So it's the commandments of the God who said, let there be. Can't be that. And then it says Elohai. So Yahweh, his God. Because we're talking about somebody very specific here. Which is interesting that we're talking about this very specific person has committed a sin. He's making this sacrifice for himself. And do you remember what this person was called? This is Asher Lo. That not, that are not, that do not. We'll know here in a minute. Te'asena. Hear asa in there? That shall not do. So he did something he's not supposed to do. Oh, yeah, that might help. Let me take a swig. Sorry, I'm really dry. Mm. I wonder if that new medicine's doing that. This is day 3, I think, or maybe 4. All right, Bishagaga. That's your favorite word, isn't it? Bishagaga. In error, there's a fault here. He committed some crime, right? This is Hashem, and he's guilty. All right, so the translation. If that Nasi sin against any of the commandments of Yahweh his God, that which he should not do, in error and is guilty, comma. See, we end in this verse at a comma. The verse is not finished yet. It's not yet finished. Can I say it that way? All right, so let's talk about Nasi. The Babylonian Talmud in Horayot 100 identifies the Nasi as a king, not likely given that there was, looks like I'm missing some words here. Weird. It says, not likely given that there was no king in the time of Moshe. Oh, so it's, am I quoting some? I don't think I'm quoting anybody. Yeah, but it's not likely that they said that. Okay, so this is a note I wrote that I've long since forgotten I said. But here's what I'm trying to say. It identifies the word Nasi as meaning king. And I said, it's not likely given that there was no king in the time of Moshe. Nor was there ever supposed to be one, if you want to know the truth, right? So of the word asher, if or when, etc., Nachmanides, Sifra, the Babylonian Talmud, in the very same place, Harayot 100, Bava Kama 87b, the Jerusalem Talmud in Harayot 320, even Ezra, Rashbam, Onkelos, some dude I can't even pronounce, and Pseudo Jonathan all wrote various different meanings here. They all had one thing in common in that they all had to change the Hebrew text to get it to say what they wanted it to say. You go, boys. Why don't you just add to and take away from the Word of God? I'm sure you'll do well with that. I wouldn't do it, but I'm sure you'll be fine. Anyway, verse 23 literally says, or becomes known to him, sin he, that sin in literally her, but it would be it. It's just feminine. And make come, so bring, offering he goat, and that really is he goat, she goat, male perfect. What? It'll make sense eventually. So we start off with the word in Hebrew word that you pronounce O. You've seen that commercial where everyone's saying oh, 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 Ozempic or something. Free plug for whoever that is. No, it's just O. We would probably spell it O-H. Bible usually just puts a big O just by itself. It usually does. English Bible anyway. But it's the word O. Well, what's it mean? It means or, this or that. Not this and that, but this or that. So then the next word is Hoda. Becomes known, or it becomes known, right? I don't really remember let's look at the verse before it. If that...
He sinned, or if it becomes known he sinned, I guess.
Yeah. Somebody's buzzing the smacker out of our TV show here. So if it becomes known, is really all that you're going to get from that word. Elav, so it becomes known to him. Hatato, his sin. If his sin becomes... So we're talking about someone who has committed a sin, has no idea that he's committed it. And we can all, every one of us, listen to the sound of my voice today, know what that's like. We all know that at some point in our life, maybe many times, we've committed a sin and we don't realize it at the time. And then later on, we're like, oh my gosh, happens at Passover for a lot of people. They find out that there was leaven in their home, that, after going through the thing, thinking they've cleaned it all out, and they go back in there and sure enough, there's something in there that they missed. So that literally, it's sin. Now, is that a sin you go to hell for, and the devil burns you and whatnot? No. That one you all know, right? Because we just went through Passover here recently. We all still remember that. You're just not allowed to talk to anybody until Pesach is over. That's your punishment. Not every sin leads to death. I read that somewhere once. All right, so we have chata, which is sin. That's sin. We have, what's coming up? Ba. Literally in her or in it, in this case. Vehevi, and it will make, bring, make, come. The word is bring. This is going to bring something, et, pointing at something, carbano, going to bring a sacrifice. That's really the word for, it's the generic word for offering. Golly, can get sacrifice out of my head. Yes, it could be a sacrifice, sure, no problem. But carbano is both of the bloody and unbloody sacrifices. In other words, a sacrifice can be a person giving their time to their synagogue. That's a sacrifice. A person giving, $5 to their 5 cents. I mean, if it's all you have, it's all you have. There was a time when if you gave a single, what they called a mite, which was like a peso, you had to have like 40 of them to have a penny's worth. I don't know how bad it really is now, but it used to seem like it was that bad. And a mite was like that. You had to have a whole bunch of them to have any real value. And there were times when somebody, that was all they could get. That was everything they had. Well, that's a lot in God's world. That's a lot of giving. And so this carbano is the word for that. It covers everything. I just got in trouble. Apparently I'm not supposed to do this. Sorry. So offering. Now it says seer. Well, that's a goat. It's hairy and it's rough. Oh, these English translations are hysterical. It goes into demons and satires resembling goats. I guess that's how you say that word. Would you think that's it? Satyrs? It's not satyr.
I don't know.
We're not sure how you spell that or pronounce that word. It's spelled very strange. Satyrs. Anyway, no. No. This is a goat, and they're called goat because of the wool. And so they call that, it's the ones that look hairy. Then it says Ezim, and again, that says, it says she-goat. I don't know why, because that's a masculine plural ending. And then it says Zahar, which is a male, and that's a sound-alike word. What's that sound like to you? It sounds like the word for remember. Yeah, but it's a sound. It's not spelled the same way. It just sounds the same. This is Tamim, perfect, complete, whole, entire. In other words, we're talking about you're going to go get a goat from the herd without a blemish. That's what they mean by perfect here. So you have, this is my translation, or his sin becomes known to him, which sin in her, that's Yisrael is the her, and he bring an offering of the goat, or from the goat, an unblemished male goat. So I could have said herd, I suppose, but it really is the word for goat. I don't know. It could go either way. Offering from the herd an unblemished goat, that would have been absolutely acceptable. So there's a lot of different ways you can translate these things. I mean, 10 people can translate that same verse 10 different ways, and every one of them be exactly right. You know? And there's an example of 2 ways that you can be right. Oh, I can't get my computer is going nuts all of a sudden. Hold on. Damn gummit. Smacking slappy smacks. It's trying to update. We don't even have the interweb connected to it. All right, so verse 24. I better take some more water. I'm having trouble again. All right, so literally it would say, and lean hand he upon head the goat, and slaughter with it in place that he slaughter the burnt offering to faces Yahweh sin he. So it's going to be before Yahweh. This was pretty self-explanatory. We've already had this verse, I think, 3 or 4 times in the same chapter. There is a reason why they do that. So it's Ves Samach. Samach. Hey, that's that Santa Claus looking letter in Hebrew. It is. Just draw a little face, a mouth, and 2 eyes in it, and it'll look just like Santa Claus. Anyway, samach, to place or lay something upon anything so that it may rest upon and be supported by it. Odd way to put that, but okay. Samach is something that brings support. So I suppose a foundation does that, but this is not the word we use for that purpose. I don't agree with that. This is more like a stick that you lean against, right? Walls on the building, I would have said, instead of the floor. But it's not wrong. It's just that I think it is given the wrong image saying it that way. This is Yado, so he's going to lean Yad, his hand. Do, the O sound, his hand. Going to lead his hand. This is all, which is on or upon, on Rosh. That is the head. Going to lean it on the head. Then it says Ha Sa'ir, goat. By the way, if there's some familiarity here, when Atasia was young, I was trying to teach her Hebrew, right? And I was teaching her the same Hebrew as the English she was learning at the time, right? So I'm telling her, say I, say ear, say hair. And then when we're doing Hebrew, ayin and pay and all of that. And then I said, say air, and she thought I was saying say hair. She had the hardest time with that. And it took me a while to realize she was getting confused because she thought I was saying say hair. I was saying say air, right? So anyway, it was cute. But you get a connection here, right? That's why they say the goat is hairy, because it's the hairy look that the goat comes from is why they call it a goat. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that in there. No extra charge for that. Well, maybe there will be. You'll get it in the mail. This is veshachat, and slaughter. It's to slay an animal. It's probably the word we ought to use for barbecue. Just saying. This is oto, which we say with it, but it's the arrow again. But with it helps us to understand the sentence better, so we almost always do that. This is be mekom, or beamcomb is another way I'm sure people somewhere pronounce it. I wouldn't pronounce it that way, but other people I'm sure do. It's to stand, to place, properly a station, from standing, existing. The place of anyone is his abode, his habitation. It's a town, it's a village. It's the word for place. That in that place, not over there, but in that place. Use the word place when you think of that. This is asher yishachat, or yishchat, which is the more common modern. I don't like it, it throws me. But it's that slaughter. So in the place that he slaughtered. This is et ha'olah. So in the place that he slaughtered the burnt offering. In other words, in the same place. That's all they're saying here. It's in the same place. Lipnei. And you say, well, Rob, why didn't you just say that? Because they weren't talking in English. Lipnei. It's literally means to face. This is the proper name of God, Yahweh. So before the face of Yahweh, that's idiomatic. That's in his presence. This is chatat. You should recognize that. That's your word for sin. That's Torah rebellion. And then it ends with the word who, which either means he or it's used for it. It's just in context of the sentence itself. So the translation is, and place his hands, because remember, we're picking up the end of a sentence here. This is not really a new sentence, even though it's got a new number. It's not really a new sentence. It's a continuation of what was already said. So it's, and place his hands on the head of the goat and kill it in the place where they slaughtered the burnt offering in the presence of Yahweh for sin. It don't know how to get it any more straightforward than that. Yeah, these are, I guess, going kind of quick today, but it's because we've already worked our way through them. So I'm trying not to go over everything, because what we're about to see here is going to be very familiar. So in verse 25, it says, would literally say in English, and take the priest from blood the sin with finger he, and give upon horns altar the burnt offering, and blood he pour to foundation altar the burnt offering, right? So this is exactly the same thing. We've already done this, right? But this is a new cow, so we're doing it again. It starts off velakach, so that's and take. This is the word we use when a man takes a wife, but it's also the word for when you. Today when I got here, I took this from over there to over here. I took it, right? It's to take. It's what we think of the English word take. It's exactly the same thing. Then it says ha-Kohen, the priest. And this, by the way, is the same priest, the Mashiach priest, right? The Mashiach Cohen, right? Is the same guy. Anyway. So are you getting yet that the Mashiach priest had to make a sacrifice for himself first, and then he had to make a sacrifice for the people? Because that's what's been going on this whole time, this whole chapter. That's what we're supposed to see. The man who is the covering has committed a sin, and he has to make a sacrifice for himself, and then he makes a sacrifice for the people, and then he becomes the covering for the people. I wonder how that would work out in the minds of most Jewish people who have all their lives been told that when Mashiach comes, he'll be perfect. He won't make any mistakes. He'll be superhuman. Would he have to make a sacrifice for himself, or would he just make the one sacrifice? We'll just let you percolate on that. Our next word is midam. It's from the blood. Ha-hatat. You're going to take from the blood for the sin, the sacrifice for the sin here. It takes some blood from that sacrifice. Then it's be'etz ba'o. I'm pretty sure that's the way everybody says that word. With finger he, literally. So he's going to take from the blood with his finger. Ve natan. And he's going to, it's normally the word for give, but it's also the word for place. To set it in place. If you give somebody a law, you have placed that law over them. So it's that same idea, I hope you get. So I'm going to take with his finger, he's going to place, it says all, which is on or upon, karnot, on the horns. He's going to take some blood with his finger and he's going to place it on the horns. Now I realize that when you look at pictures that were painted, in the Dark Ages, for the most part, I don't think you find any images painted of the ark or any of those objects, because you had horns on the ark and you had horns on the barbecue pit where you actually cooked the animal, and then you had the horns on the incense. What's the word? What are those things called? I can't think of the English word for it. Anyway, in the images, you see them putting horns or at least, pointy places. No. The horns of something that is square are the corners. The corners. So it's not, yes, the word literally means horns, but this is an idiomatic language. So they're using this of the corners. It's where they're put together and they're reinforced, and it's the strongest part of a box, if you will, of a chest. Ark. The ark, had horns, right? It had the reinforcement was in the corners. And it's an idea that's just utterly lost to the West anymore, because they think there's actually horns. So he's not doing that. He's taking his blood, he's going to put it on the corners, and it says misbach, of the altar. That's the word I was looking for. I don't know why it just would not jump in my head. So you have the altar of burnt offerings, and you have the altar of incense, and then of course you have the ark itself, the chest, right, and the aron. And no, they didn't have horns. They didn't have animal horns sticking out of them. No. Think about that. Is God going to really? You take wood and you build something, and then you cover it all in gold, and then you stick 2 goat horns on the end? Anyway, so it's this altar, ha'olah, the altar, the burnt, it's the altar of burnt offerings. So it's anyway. This is ve'et, and it's pointing to something, damo, and blood of that same sacrifice, yishpoch, that's to pour. It's like to take not a picture that has an image on it, but a picture, right? Am I right? Can it be helped? A picture, because people get this wrong all the time. They say picture when they're talking about an image of somebody, and then they say anyway. So it's a pitcher full of water, and you pour it out. There's your word. There's your meaning. This is El, which is to Yaso, to the foundation. You're going to pour it out to the foundation. Mizbach, that's the word for altar. Ha'olah, so it's going to be poured out on the foundation at the foot of it. Let's put it that way. All right. So our translation is, in the Cohen. You remember this guy, the Mashiach Cohen, the anointed Cohen. He will take from the blood for the sin with his finger and place it on the corners of the altar of burnt offerings. And he will pour it out at the foundation of the altar of burnt offerings. Now, of that word, burnt offering, altar of burnt offerings, are those words? Nachmanides pointed out that the repetition of the name of the altar was a common writing style of the period. Again, we now know this to be true because of the work of Umberto Cassuto on the Ugaritic text. That was his big thing. And he's proven that this was not the way we do things in our world today, and because they use all these different words, they become bullet points and everything has its individual meaning. No, it was just a writing style. All right. Yeah, so we have plenty of time somehow. Verse 26 would literally read this way. And, arrow, at fat it he burn, or all fat it he burn, and make burn you as fat, sacrifice the pieces. That one's difficult. And cover upon him the priest from sin he, and will be forgiven to he. Not as hard as it seems. Ve'et, so, and it's going to point to something. It says all chelbo. Not elbow, chelbo. All the fat. The fatness, metaphorically, is the best part, right? The excellent part. And you think of another way that we know of it from particularly the Dark Ages. Remember how in the Dark Ages, the pictures of the naked women, it was always, let's say, plump women? Because in their time, if you were plump, let's just say it that way, you were royalty. Because you had plenty. Everybody else was skinny as a toothpick in those days, right? So to be plump was actually desirable. It was the in thing. It was what it said, that you were somebody. You were going somewhere in life. You were born into it or married into it or whatever. It didn't make any difference. You were there. Yeah, that all comes from that same idea. It's the best part. It's the excellent part. It's the extra, right? So then it says yaktir. That's the scent that goes up, like when you're cooking the meat, you can smell that, and it makes you hungry and all that. That's what we're talking about. This is ha means beha, not be'ach, beha. It's a different word. And make burn you. Remember that? It's you make it burn, to give a scent, a fragrant offering, and all that kind of stuff. So it's like saying scent, make a scent, right? And here we're using the same word, so it's literally being used to make it more important. This is the important part of this verse. Then it says ke chelev. Is that the same word as before? Yes, it is. Chelbo, chelev. Those are essentially the same word. So we've used that twice. So this is another important part of this verse. Then it says zevach. That's the slaying, the sacrifice. That's the actual cutting up of the sacrifice itself, or saying that it has been sacrificed. In other words, it's already been cut up. This is ha shalamim. You take a word like shalom, and you put, this is peace, But shalom is many pieces. It's a word that basically is already in plural, and then they put a plural ending on it. So it's like pieces. I don't know. So this is, well, if you think about it, let's say you got 1,000 people who have committed a sin and are here for this sin sacrifice. That's pieces. This is the peace offering that's covering a lot of people. So, but it's not because there's 1,000 people there. Could be 2 people there, but there could be 1 person there, right? There could be, and it could still be plural. Why? Because this goes on forever. It doesn't ever go away. Maybe physically it does, but something about this goes on forever. In other words, it's coming back year after year after year. There's going to be a covering year after year after year. There's going to be a covering. And this covering, you know who it is, right? And it says, Vechiper, and cover. I said there's going to be a covering. Now there is, right? So this is the peace, the covering for the peace, right? Alav, that's upon him. Ha Cohen, the priest, the Mashiach priest, by the way. Mecha Tato, from his sin. It's not really saying this, but it kind of like this. It's like saying this guy is always going to have sin that he has to deal with. There's always going to be a need for his sacrifice. Maybe not Messiah's sacrifice, but certainly this guy. The Messiah, as opposed to just your average, everyday Mashiach Cohen. Hope you guys get what I'm throwing at you here. Then it says, Ve nislach, and he will be forgiven. This is lo, which is to he, or for he, or for it. He'll be forgiven for it. You could say it that way if you wanted to. So my translation then is, and all the fat of it, the goat, he, the Mashiach Cohen, will burn. And you will make it, the fat is the it here, burn according to the fat of the sacrifice of the peace offering. It's done in exactly the same way as the peace offering. And the Cohen, the Mashiach Cohen, will be a covering over them, and they will be forgiven. So it's just summing up, right? All right. Well, what happens in verse 27 is that we're going to switch from the group to the individual. And this all is going to start to be making way more sense in the next it may take the next couple of lessons, but we may clear it up next week. I'm still just going to throw that out there and let you guys percolate on that because I think it's funny. Anyway, I have run out of time. I can't go on. I don't have enough time to go any further. So we're going to call it a day. Shalom, shalom, y'all. Get some rest today.